Hi, welcome back. If you haven't been here before, my name's Lee, and today we're going to talk about the incoming economic tsunami to Europe. And a lot of this has been caused by what is, in my opinion, the very hasty action of the EU and the UK and the US to impose sanctions onto Russia. And I really don't think they thought these through as carefully as they should have done, because this is going to have not just a short-term effect on the economy of Europe, but I think it's going to have a long-term structural effect on the competitiveness of the EU. And I'm going to explain my reasoning behind that in this video. Now, after the coronavirus, this has already put European and UK economies in a bad position, in bad shape. And if we look at the February inflation rates for the European Union, that was 6.2%. And for the UK, the CPI was 5.5%. Now, these are levels that haven't been seen for some significant amount of time. And judging by what I'm reading from the Bank of England, for example, are suggesting that interest rates could be at 8% by April, and even into double digits, pushing 10%, possibly more, by the end of the year. And this is really bad news for consumers. And if we look at the cost of oil, that did take a dip over the last week, but it's back up to about $110 today as I make this video, and future contracts for May and June are around $114, $116. So unless the governments act to reduce some of the tax on fuel, then the prices will continue to rise. They certainly won't go in the downward direction at the moment, because oil is bought forward. So the cost for delivery of oil in May and June, as I said, is like $114, $116 a barrel, which is significantly higher than it has been for a long time. Now, what you also need to understand is that Russia are not only a large supplier of fuel to the European Union, less so England, because England gets a lot of its gas from the North Sea, but they still do. This will still affect the UK as well. But Russia supply anywhere between 35 and 45% of energy, whether that be oil, gas or coal, to the European Union. And there are some economies that are very, very dependent on that. Italy, the Netherlands, Germany especially are very reliant on the gas. Now, the EU have suggested that they're going to reduce their dependency on Russian energy by the end of this year significantly. Now, personally, I think that is just a pipe dream. We see I think it was the German energy minister, go off to Qatar and has come back, and although he says he's got a deal, there are no specifics. There's no specifics being announced. And I read in a news report that Qatar are going to double their LNG production by 2025, which is 4 years away from now. But it's going to take at least 2 or 3 years for Germany to be able to build the LNG ports and storage facilities for that. And other European countries are also going to have to consider that, because obviously it's much more difficult and expensive to ship LNG gas from halfway around the world as it is to just get it through a pipeline from Russia. Now, Russia will have some long-term contracts with the European Union to supply gas, and right now Russia are still supplying that gas. But there's a couple of things at play here. So The first thing is that Russia could limit the amount of gas that it supplies to Europe, which would again cause the price to rise, or they will just not renew those contracts when they run out. Now, I don't know at this stage. I did try to do some digging to find out when those contracts end, but I can't find any information on that. And I suspect that Russia will pivot to sending a majority of its gas and oil eastwards into places like China. China have an insatiable appetite for gas and oil because there's a lot of industry here. So I think Russia have no problem sending it to Russia have no problem sending it to China. Now, the thing why I said at the beginning of the video that Europe and the UK are going to have structural higher costs. You also need to remember that apart from just energy, Russia supply a lot of commodities and raw materials. And we're already seeing the effect of things like grains, wheat and barley and food oils have all increased significantly on the commodity markets, and also things like copper, nickel and steel is hitting an all-time high. So this is going to have a huge effect to food, to manufactured goods in the UK and the European Union. Now, what you've got to remember is Russia is fairly close to the EU, so shipping costs are much lower from Russia than they're going to be from Europe buying it from other parts of the world. But I think what's to remember here is that although we hear Europe talking about sourcing its energy from elsewhere, and that's all well and good, but this LNG gas is going to come at a much higher cost. Now, if you work that into energy intensive industries, it means their costs are going to be high because LNG gas is much more expensive than piped natural gas. And the other thing is LNG gas doesn't tend to trade on longer term contracts. The price is much more, fluctuates much more depending on the supply and demand. And from what I can understand, the demand on LNG will increase over the years, and as we get into like winter times, that will increase further. So it will also mean that the cost base for European industry will be significantly higher than the cost base of industries elsewhere, i.e. in Asia or possibly even in America, because the US are much more self-sufficient energy-wise than Europe and the UK. So in my opinion, Europe and the UK are going to have sort of much longer term higher costs than what is being talked about at the moment, and they're going to become less competitive. And one other thing I'll mention is as inflation starts to take off in the UK and Europe, the government may be forced to increase interest rates. And we've already seen, I think, 3 rate increases in the UK, and the bank are talking about further increases. But they're in a dilemma now in that they are worried about this inflation. And normally the way to fight inflation is by increasing interest rates. But they are also now concerned about doing that because it could drive the economy into recession. It also means that to service government debt, of which the UK especially has a large amount of government debt, becomes much more expensive. So this will add billions of pounds a year into interest payments, which is money they can't spend on hospitals and other services. And it will be very obvious that wages won't keep pace with inflation. You know, it's almost unheard of that people will be getting pay rises of 8 and 10%. So people are going to get poorer. And I really think that there's a huge shock coming down the pipeline that people just don't realise. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. That's sort of my analysis of the situation. But as always, for now, take care.